has never been clear science to show that cloud seeding actually does work. While there are still plenty of questions about it, reporter Luke Runyon did find some answers.
Picture this. You're in a tiny airplane flying inside a blizzard. The turbulence is intense. There's no bathroom. And you're up in the air for at least 4, maybe 6 hours.
And then compounded on all of that, you're watching a little computer screen the entire time.
Sounds like a nightmare, right? But that type of experience is exactly what scientist Jeff French lives for.
Yeah, there's been more than 1 or 2 people that have been sick on this plane.
French is a professor of atmospheric science at the University of Wyoming. Parked in a hangar outside Laramie, we're sitting in a small propeller plane that he uses to study clouds. An expensive suite of onboard instruments lets him look at how snow forms in real time.
Ice crystals come in many different shapes. They can look like 6-sided plates. They can look like long needles or columns. They can look like dendrites, which is kind of the typical snowflake shape.
Of course, clouds can make their own snowflakes. But decades ago, people thought they could improve the process, making clouds drop more snow where they wanted it. Cloud seeding involves spraying silver iodide particles into clouds. They act as the seed that can grow a new snowflake. French co-authored a 2018 report that showed definitively
that if you put silver iodine into clouds with certain characteristics, you can generate ice. That ice can grow. That ice will eventually fall to the surface of sun.
That study, conducted in the mountains outside Boise, Idaho, was a big deal. Before then, no one had solid evidence that showed cloud seeding worked in the real world. So, for the first time, French was able to say,
yes, the amount of snow that was falling at this location increased.
Case closed, right? Well, not so fast. Sarah Tessendorf is a researcher at the National Center for Atmospheric Research in Boulder, Colorado.
Sometimes the question about does it work is, does it produce additional snowpack on the ground? And we're still working to try to answer that question.
Tessendorf is circumspect about all the promises proponents of cloud seeding make and whether they can prove it. In the past, less rigorous studies have shown cloud seeding can boost snowpack by up to 15%.
It's a complicated problem. All the results that we see in one cloud will not apply to every cloud everywhere.
In the Idaho study, scientists sprayed silver iodine into the kinds of clouds that looked ripe for seeding. More than 24 of them, but they could only draw a clear link between seeding and snowfall in 3 cases.
We want to see 95% confidence that there is no other reason that this effect occurred other than cloud seeding.
Neil Bracken runs Weather Modification Incorporated, a North Dakota-based cloud seeding company. Last year's hot, dry weather had Western water users coming to him for help, even with the scientific blind spots.
I can say that we're up significantly in the last 24 months on the number of smaller, large-scale programs that we're modeling and completing feasibility studies for.
He says the Idaho study only reaffirms his company's promise to states, water districts, and ski resorts that the technology is effective.
All of ours was covered up.
But back in Laramie, Jeff French says water leaders should know huge gaps remain in our understanding of how well cloud seeding works.
They should realize that there's a risk associated with it. That risk is that it may not be having an impact at all.
Still, given the looming shortages within the Colorado River Basin, he's not surprised that some see the practice as worthwhile and are willing to front the cost to make it happen. I'm Luke Runyon.
This story is part of ongoing coverage of the Colorado River Basin, produced in partnership with station KUNC in northern Colorado, with financial support by the Walton Family Foundation. And you can find it on our website, posted at kjzz.org. You're listening to Morning Edition on 91.5.
KJZZ will support our Mesa Art Center. Discover architects of air, Alba Silva, a maze of color and light spaces Pioneer Park from February 9th through 17th. Tickets and details at mesaartcenter.com. ignored it. The embattled president said he would not cave in to pressure from those calling for his departure. Mr. Maduro accused the United States of instigating a political crisis in Venezuela.
Elsewhere, Pope Francis has been given a lavish welcome in the United Arab Emirates, the first ever papal visit to the Arabian Peninsula, the historic heartland of Islam. Before his arrival, the Pope appealed for an easing of the plight of civilians in Yemen, where the UAE is part of the Saudi-led coalition fighting Houthi rebels. And Iraq's president has rebuked claims by President Trump that one of the reasons US forces are still in Iraq is to keep an eye on Iran.
President Saleh said Iraq could not be used as a base for attacking a neighbouring country. Don't burden Iraq, he said, with your own issues. At the weekend, Donald Trump said 2,000 American troops would soon be moving from Syria to the huge Ain Assad airbase in Iraq's Anbar province.
Paul Adams, Roberta Preston, the BBC.
Kenyon Phoenix Morning Edition on JCC. We are in a bit of a breathing moment right now. One government shutdown is over. Who knows if another one's coming? Meanwhile, the last jobs report was pretty great. And the Federal Reserve has tried to soothe frayed nerves by saying it's going to be patient and flexible. It's not going to slam the brakes on the economy in some kind of jarring way. So where does all of that leave us? Julia Coronado is founder of Macro Policy Perspectives. Good morning.
Good morning.
One takeaway from the Fed's announcement and the reaction to it is that it seems like markets and the Fed have really been on different pages when it comes to the economic outlook this year. The Fed, for a long while, was saying, look, things are great, and we're probably going to raise rates until they said they'd be patient recently. The markets were like, no, we are really concerned about long-term bonds, the long-term outlook. What should we take away from that?
Well, I think that the markets and the Fed have somewhat converged. There's a little bit more sort of optimism that maybe it won't be so bad after all, but still concerned. And meanwhile, the Fed, who was bubbly and optimistic, is now a little bit more cautious. And so I think everybody, both the markets and the Fed, are in wait-and-see mode to see whether some of these global risks or even the domestic risks from things like the government shutdown, how much they affect the U.S. economy.
Julia Coronado, founder of Macro Policy Perspectives. Thanks, as always, for talking.
My pleasure.
Let's do the numbers. The Dow Jones Industrial Average is down 30 points. That is a tenth of a percent. The S&P 500 is down a bit less than a tenth of a percent. The Nasdaq is up 0.2%, and the 10-year Treasury yield is at 2.72%. Nearly every major bank in Australia has been accused of some form of misconduct after an official investigation into the banking system there. Among other things, banks are accused of charging customers without their knowledge for services the banks never provided. High-ups in some Australian banks are also accused of covering up the misconduct. Some of the findings are reminiscent of recent scandals here in the U.S. involving Wells Fargo. The BBC's Australia correspondent Phil Mercer joins us with more. Hi, Phil.
Morning to you.
So give us some sense of some of the more outrageous things these banks are accused of doing.
Well, charging fees to dead customers is one of the scandals that has shocked Australia. There was also evidence of corporate fraud and actions undertaken by institutions to deceive regulators. So right across the board, this has been an industry that has been beset by greed and misconduct.
What have banks said about this?
Well, we've heard Well, we've heard from the Australian Banking Association. This is the umbrella organisation saying that the report handed down was very tough medicine. The Banking Association says it accepts responsibility for the wrongdoing and that it was sorry for the pain that the banks have caused.
So what happens now? I mean, what kind of change, or regulatory change, is going to take place as a result of this?
Well, we don't know. What we do know is that the Royal Commission has handed down 76 recommendations. There is part of the report referring several very high-profile institutions to corporate regulators for possible criminal charges. The government says that it is taking action on all 76 recommendations. It's also promising to give more power to the regulators, better protection for consumers and remediation for victims of misconduct.
BBC Australia correspondent Phil Mercer, thanks very much for speaking with us.
Thank you.
Marketplace Morning Report is supported by the Candida Fund, working to advance individual dignity and sustainable communities through investments in transformative leaders and ideas. Learn more at KENDEDAFund.org. And by Constant Contact, whose marketing advisors work directly with small businesses for monthly marketing guidance, personalized support, and email campaign optimization. Learn more at ConstantContact.com.
Hawaii produces great coffee, but coffee farmers on the Big Island of Hawaii are having a tough time. Kona Coast coffee farmers are experiencing crop yields declines of as much as 40% in some cases. Hawaii Public Radio's Ryan Finnerty has more.
For residents on the Big Island of Hawaii, 2018 was a year filled with floods, hurricanes, and a volcanic eruption.
Well, there is a new danger from the volcano erupting on Hawaii's Big Island today.
Fountains of lava 65 feet high.
Many farmers are only now learning how all that affected their crops.
The crop came off early and basically at once. Normally, a season that takes 120 days, we were over in 65 to 80 days.
That was Roger Kaiwi Manchin, a coffee farmer and president of the Kona Coffee Council. Hawaii-grown coffee accounts for less than 1% of global production, but it's considered a premium product and commands a high price. The final value of the current harvest is estimated to be about $44 million, a 10% reduction from the previous year. So what happened with the latest harvest? Despite several big storms, there was a lack of consistent rainfall during the critical growing season. Many farmers attributed that to volcanic activity at Kilauea.
The volcano started to explode and things changed drastically.
Kilauea has technically been erupting since the 1980s, but this past summer it went into overdrive, destroying hundreds of homes and spewing ash and volcanic gases into the sky. Chris Manfredi grows coffee in the Kahu district of the Big Island. It's one of Hawaii's fastest growing coffee producing regions. It's also just a few miles downwind from the Kilauea crater.
Swirling sulfur dioxide gas doesn't really follow any recognizable pattern to how it can impact the farm.
It turns out there may be a connection between the sulfur dioxide and the lack of rain. Hao Shin-Chu is the Hawaii state climatologist. He says initially the gas causes more cloud droplets to form.
But then the droplets become too small.
Too small to create rain. Volcanic activity at Kilauea has now dropped off, and coffee farmers are hoping clear skies will bring a return to normal growing conditions. In Honolulu, I'm Ryan Finnerty for Marketplace.
And in New York, I'm Sabri Benishore with the Marketplace Morning Report. From APM, American Public Media.
And for a complete wrap on the business day, do not forget to listen this evening for the Marketplace Evening Report at 6 p.m. Then the BBC's World Business Report at 6:30 here on KJZZ, FM Phoenix, and HD. Perfect mix of BBC, NPR, and KJZZ News in a service of Rio-Solano College.
KJZZ is supported by the Children's Museum of Phoenix, presenting Awakening Creativity, a new performing arts program for children ages birth to 5. Explore music, dance, and drama in fun ways. More at childrensmuseumofphoenix.org.
President Trump will address the nation after a 5-week government shutdown. Will party leaders make a deal on border security? Listen to NPR's special coverage of the 2019 State of the Union address from NPR News.
And listen for that special coverage tomorrow night starting at 7 o'clock here on KJZZ. And we could be wet by tomorrow, a 50% chance of rain for tomorrow. Today, a 20% chance of rain, high of 66. Cloudy and 55 in Phoenix at 8 o'clock.
Good morning. The United States is promising humanitarian aid to Venezuela at the request of an opposition leader. The latest challenge to the existing government this hour on Morning Edition from NPR News.
Ahead in KJZZ News at 8:04, the latest developments in the case of an embattled Arizona state rep and against the nurse suspected of raping and impregnating an incapacitated woman at Hacienda Healthcare.
A jury soon holds the fate of El Chapo. I'm Rachel Martin.
And I'm Steve Inskeep. In this hour, how strong was the federal case against the alleged Mexican drug lord? Also, who's the man in line to become the next governor of Virginia? We profiled Justin Fairfax, the African-American lieutenant governor, as Governor Ralph Northam faces pressure to resign. And as the Patriots were winning the Super Bowl in Atlanta, artists across that city were painting 9 murals of Colin Kaepernick. It's Monday, February 4th, the birthday of Zoe Manville of Portugal, the man who's 35. The news is next.
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Corva Coleman. Virginia Democratic Governor Ralph Northam is continuing to resist calls to resign. This comes after he walked back his apology over a racist photo that was on his personal page in his medical school yearbook. Northam at first said it was him in the picture, then on Saturday said it wasn't. But he also admitted appearing in blackface in a separate instance. Former Virginia Democratic Governor Terry McAuliffe have told NPR's All Things Considered that Northam can no longer lead the state.
We got to move forward. Our state is in a very good position. We've got to continue to go. But he's just going to have an impossible task now when everybody in the state has called for him to resign. We're in the middle of legislative session. Tuesday is a big day where it's called crossover, where the bills go back and forth. This is the time that the governor has to be leaning in.
Virginia's state Democratic lawmakers are meeting again today to discuss the matter. Iraqi officials are rejecting talk by President Trump that he wants to keep U.S. forces in Iraq to watch Iran. Trump reiterated that statement in a CBS interview Sunday. NPR's Jane Araf has more from Baghdad.
Iraqi President Barham Saleh told a forum that U.S. troops are in Iraq for the specific mission of helping Iraqi forces fight ISIS, and nothing else. He said Iraq isn't part of the U.S. battle with Iran. Don't overburden Iraq with your own issues, he added. Saleh pointed out there's an active debate in Iraq about whether to ask U.S. forces to stay or go, and he said Iraq will decide in the framework of its constitution. There are roughly 6,000 U.S. forces in Iraq, including at the Ain al-Assad military base in the west of the country, where Trump is talking about keeping a presence. Those troops are mostly assisting Iraqi forces in fighting ISIS along the Iraqi-Syrian border. Jane Araf, NPR News, Baghdad.
Pope Francis was given a red carpet welcome today in Abu Dhabi for his landmark visit to the United Arab Emirates. NPR's Sylvia Poggioli reports he met privately with UAE leaders ahead of his key speech later today at a large interfaith meeting.
The Pope arrived at the large presidential palace topped with glass and golden domes in a small, simple car, but he was escorted by guards on horseback while Air Force jets spewed out plumes of smoke in yellow and white, the Vatican flag colors. The Pope was greeted by Crown Prince Sheikh Mohammed bin Zayed Al Nahyan and other leaders. Writing in the palace guest book, Francis asked that God grant the UAE divine blessings of peace and fraternal solidarity. The visit is taking place in the shadow of the war in Yemen, where the UAE has a key military role alongside Saudi Arabia in what is considered the world's worst humanitarian crisis. It's not known whether Francis will address the conflict during his visit. Sylvia Poggioli, NPR News, Abu Dhabi.
On Wall Street, the Dow was down 63 points. This is NPR.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include the law firm Cooley LLP, with offices in the U.S., Europe, and China. Cooley advises entrepreneurs, investors, financial institutions, and established companies around the world, where innovation meets the law.
From KJZZ News in Phoenix, good morning, I'm Phil Lantzman. It was recently revealed that State Representative David Stringer was arrested on multiple charges, including child pornography, when he was living in Maryland in the 1980s. Critics wanted to know if he disclosed that when he applied to practice law here in Arizona. As KJZZ's Claire Caulfield reports, the Supreme Court says they can't find his application.
A spokesman for the Arizona Supreme Court said they only keep these kind of application records for 7 years, and Stringer was admitted to the state bar 15 years ago. Stringer says he has no criminal record, which is true. Although he was arrested and pled guilty to sex offenses, the plea deal said those would be erased if he successfully completed probation. However, the application to practice law in Arizona specifically requires disclosure of arrests and plea deals. Stringer still faces investigations by the House Ethics Committee, including one related to comments the lawmaker made last year about immigrants needing to blend in. Claire Caulfield, KJZZ News, Phoenix.
A nurse accused of raping an incapacitated woman who later gave birth at Hacienda Healthcare in Phoenix last December will face a judge tomorrow. KJZZ's Kathy Ritchie has a preview.
36-year-old Nathan Sutherland was indicted on charges of sexual assault and abuse of a vulnerable adult last week. He's expected to enter his plea to those charges on Tuesday. Sutherland allegedly raped a 29-year-old woman at Hacienda Healthcare where he worked as a nurse. His attorney says there's no evidence linking Sutherland to the rape, but investigators say his DNA matched a sample from the baby. Kathy Ritchie, KJZZ News, Phoenix.
In other news this morning, Phoenix is looking for someone to turn a former firehouse into a restaurant. From KJZZ's Downtown Bureau, Christina Estes has the latest developments in the plan to revitalize Hance Park.
We're really pushing hard to activate the firehouse.
That's Phoenix Parks Director Inger Erickson. She says the city will soon solicit for people to turn the former firehouse into a full-service restaurant. Near the Central Avenue Bridge and Burton Bar Library, the firehouse will be key to the project's first phase. So will fundraising.
I'm representing Phoenix Community Alliance. Phoenix Community Alliance's job is to try and raise money from the private sector to make this a reality.
Larry Lazarus recently told a council subcommittee fundraising will begin in March. The three-phase project is expected to cost around $100 million. So far, the city has committed $15 million. Christina Estes, KJZZ News, Phoenix.
As flu season continues in Arizona, the state health department reports there have been 8,000 confirmed cases statewide. Jessica Rigler with the Arizona Department of Health Services says while the numbers are down compared to last year's record-breaking number of flu cases, the season's not over yet.
In Arizona, we're actually seeing a higher number of people visiting the ER associated with flu compared to the rest of the country. So we're not out of the woods yet.
Rigler adds there's one bright spot, no reported child deaths so far this flu season. Sports, Ricky Fowler overcame a triple bogey with birdies on 2 of his last 4 holes and won the PGS Phoenix Open at the TPC Scottsdale yesterday. And it could be more wet weather for us, 20% chance today, 50 for tomorrow. More rain this week, high of about 66 today. It's 8:08.
It's Morning Edition from NPR News. I'm Steve Inskeep.
And I'm Rachel Martin. Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro is warning that his country could slip into civil war. Protesters were out again on the streets this weekend, many of them urging Maduro to leave office. Maduro is also facing international pressure. A series of European leaders announced today they are now recognizing opposition leader Juan Guaido as the president of Venezuela. President Trump announced his support for Guaido more than a week ago, and in an interview with CBS's Margaret Brennan over the weekend, Trump wouldn't rule out direct U.S. intervention on the ground.
What would make you use the U.S. military in Venezuela? What's the national security?
I don't want to say that, but certainly it's something that's on the, it's an option.
We're joined now by Roberta Jacobson. She is former Assistant Secretary of State for Western Hemisphere Affairs and a former U.S. Ambassador to Mexico. Ambassador, thanks for being with us.
Good morning, Rachel.
President Trump has long argued for less U.S. intervention in other countries, far more isolationist global position. What's motivating his administration's aggressive response in Venezuela?
Well, I think there's 2 things. One is clearly the desperation of the situation there, which I think all of us agree with. You've got a country which has the largest oil reserves on the planet, and yet 90% of people live in poverty and children with malnutrition. But the second, I think, is a fairly aggressive line from this administration, pushed hard by the Florida delegation in Congress and those who are Venezuelan exiles as well as others, that really is a throwback, frankly, to the Cold War.
Explain that, because this is about Cuba and Cuba's influence in Venezuela, correct?
Well, I mean, it's about Cuba, it's about Russia to some extent, it's about others outside the hemisphere engaging in this hemisphere, but it's also about this troika of tyranny, as John Bolton said in a speech in Miami not long ago, and that is the kind of language that we haven't heard in decades. And I think all of us are incredibly frustrated and angry about the usurpation of power by Maduro in Venezuela. But I think leaving the military option so aggressively out there really reawakens the genetic anti-Americanism and memory of U.S. intervention in the past and can be very harmful and risky.
So, as you know, the U.S. has a mixed record of supporting movements and leaders in South America. How does the U.S. administration, the Trump administration, avoid those pitfalls?
Well, I think one of the most important things in support of Guaido and the National Assembly, which are the remaining legitimate institution in Venezuela, is to try and support humanitarian aid. People will support someone who eases their misery. And I know some humanitarian aid was announced yesterday, but that won't get into the country. That will get to borders, but it won't get into the country.
Right, because Maduro is still the president.
Correct, and he holds a monopoly of power. So I think the other crucial question, which we don't know too much about, is what is going on in the military behind the scenes. There's been a couple of defectors, but not a lot. But many below the rank of general are living the same poverty that others are. And so the question is when those cracks begin to show, and Guaido has to act to try and gain that support, which I believe he's trying to do. But the most important thing would be to get humanitarian aid in working with international organizations.
Does it make a difference, you think, that European countries are now following the U.S. lead here, including the UK, France, Germany, a list of others now supporting Guaido?
Right, and the European Parliament voted to support yesterday, hopefully, or the other day, and hopefully the European Union as a whole will. I think it does make a difference. I think it's always important. The more countries you can have sort of on your side supporting Guaido, the circle of people is getting smaller that support Maduro, and that's important.
Do you think he ends up leaving?
I think he ends up leaving only when there's a physical threat to him or his family or imprisonment, or when the military says it's time to go, and I don't think we're there yet.
Ambassador Roberta Jacobson, former Assistant Secretary of State for Western Hemisphere Affairs, thank you so much for your time this morning.
Thank you, Rachel.
Two political careers are right at the edge of change in Virginia this morning. One is that of Governor Ralph Northam. The Democrat apologized for a racist photo discovered in his medical school yearbook from 1984, but he then said the photo did not show him, and he has been trying to keep his job amid many calls to resign. The other career right on the edge is the man who would take charge if Northam is pushed out. Lieutenant Governor Justin Fairfax is only the second African-American elected statewide in Virginia history. NPR's Bragton Booker has this profile.
Even before Justin Fairfax won his last election, he was getting a lot of buzz. Here's former President Barack Obama telling a Richmond crowd in 2017 that Justin Fairfax would make Virginia proud.
Justin went to college, went to law school, gave over his life to public service just to make sure that any striving young kid could have the same chance as he did.
At his victory speech a few weeks later, Justin Fairfax thanked two titans of Virginia politics. The first, Linwood Holton. He's the Republican governor who took office in 1970 and helped put an end to segregation practices in Virginia. The other shout-out was to the only other African-American ever elected statewide.
And I also stand on the shoulders of a great man, L. Douglas Wilder, who was elected Lieutenant Governor of Virginia in 1985 and Governor in 1989, and I thank him for his leadership.
Fairfax got his undergrad degree from Duke and studied law at Columbia, both on scholarship. His wife is a dentist, and they have 2 young kids. At 39 years old, Justin Fairfax is a lot of things Governor Ralph Northam is not. Young, charismatic, and part of a multicultural wave sweeping through Virginia's Democratic Party. Here's Fairfax speaking on WAMU's Kojo Nnamdi show the day after his 2017 victory.
Virginia will be the match that sparks the wildfire of progressive change all across this country, and I believe that that's what's going to happen.
Since the racist photo of Northam's yearbook page surfaced, demonstrations popped up outside the governor's mansion.
Hey, hey, no governor, KKK.
Virginia Democratic Senators Tim Kaine and Mark Warner have called on Northam to resign. So have presidential hopefuls Senators Cory Booker of New Jersey and Kamala Harris of California. Former Vice President Joe Biden has too. adding on Twitter that, quote, Justin Fairfax is the leader Virginia needs now. For his part, Fairfax told NBC4 in Washington he hoped the governor would make the right decision.
We're at this really important inflection moment in the history of Virginia and of this nation, and we need leaders and leadership that can unite us.
Fairfax assuming the role of uniter-in-chief may be just what Virginia needs at this moment. That's according to Rachel Bidikofer. She's a political science professor at Christopher Newport University in Virginia.
I do think there's a lot of symbolic value from having Justin Fairfax become the state's governor at this particular juncture in American politics, because particularly here in Virginia, racial politics have just been so much in the limelight.
She points to the deadly Unite the Right rally in Charlottesville about a year and a half ago. Then there was this, just a few weeks ago, on the floor of the Virginia Senate.
Mr. President, I rise today to celebrate the 212th birthday of Robert E. Lee.
Elected officials paid tribute to Confederate icon General Robert E. Lee. As Lieutenant Governor, Fairfax normally presides over the chamber, but instead he sat in quiet protest. Fairfax is a descendant of a slave, Simon Fairfax, who was emancipated in 1798. He explained his boycott to member station WVTF.
I want to be clear that my children, my grandchildren, will not see me on videotape presiding over a motion honoring people who fought for a set of laws and a society that would have enslaved members of their family.
It was the right thing to do for him. It was the right thing to do for Virginia.
That's Jeffrey Warren. He's a Democrat in the Virginia House of Delegates and a member of the Black Legislative Caucus. He says with that protest, Fairfax sent a message that racism and bigotry are things in Virginia's distant past.
It was a great testament and an example of who Justin Fairfax is and who Justin Fairfax will be in his public service life.
He hopes the next call to service for Justin Fairfax will come soon, when he's sworn in as the 74th governor of Virginia. Braxton Booker, NPR News.
So as fans gathered to watch the Super Bowl yesterday, Fabian Williams was on a mission. He led a team of artists to paint murals in the city, 9 murals, all of them featuring former NFL quarterback Colin Kaepernick.
In 2016, Kaepernick became the face of sideline protests. Players knelt during the national anthem to protest police brutality against African Americans.
Colin Kaepernick's protest against racial injustice seems to be gaining traction.
49ers quarterback knelt instead of standing during the national anthem at last night's game. He was not alone.
San Francisco 49ers quarterback Colin Kaepernick again refused to stand for the playing of the national anthem.
But since Kaepernick knelt, the accomplished quarterback has been unable to find a team in the NFL, and the league has pushed back against the protests. William, the artist, had been trying to honor him. In 2017, he painted a mural showing Kaepernick in an Atlanta Falcons uniform.
I felt like because of Atlanta civil rights history, he would be the perfect type of player for this team in this city.
But just days before the Super Bowl in Atlanta, Williams noticed that his mural of Kaepernick was gone. It was torn down with the building that it had been painted on.
You know, me as an artist, it was almost like being in a rap battle with nobody. You know, so I was like, okay, I can't just let this just go down.
So yesterday, Williams and a team of local artists painted 9 new murals of Kaepernick across Atlanta. They called it Capitol.
A rap battle with nobody. Well, he's winning because supporters offered the artists snacks and help.
There's like an urge for people to feel good about what they do and to be on what they feel is the right side of history.
Which means that even if fans never see Colin Kaepernick on another NFL sideline or on the field, they can see him suited up across neighborhoods in Atlanta.
And this is Morning Edition here in Phoenix on KJZZ 91.5 and KJZZ.org. 19 minutes after 8 o'clock on this cloudy Monday. And thanks for being with us. Looks like we're...
He said some impolitic things even about Republican positions.
People described him as looking young, looking a little bit out of place. The lobby of the governor's mansion that he's in looks a bit like a hotel.
And it's just not an equal footing with the president standing there in the Capitol in front of the entire Congress and most of the federal establishment.
Symptoms seems like we look for hope in different places. He then ran for president, kind of fizzled out early on, and we haven't heard much from him since.
That's right. There is no question but that his career was never the same after that. job. But then he had a little moment of dry mouth and didn't have the water bottle close enough. Fighting America.
Okay, to give the play-by-play here, he's sort of wiping his mouth.
On foreign policy, America continues to be...
Here, he needs a little more saliva than he's got.
Nothing has frustrated me more than false choices like the one the president laid out tonight.
And then there's the reach.
The choice isn't just between big...
He just has to. And there's a desperation in both the lunge and the grab, and his eyes flick up at the camera.
Almost never breaks eye contact with the camera, even as he's reaching off screen.
But there's a change in the expression in his eyes when he looks back up as if to say, you didn't see that, did you?
We should also say, I want to be bipartisan in our criticism, but for 8 of the last 10 years, President Barack Obama was delivering the address, and so the response was coming from Republicans, which is why this criticism seems to be a bit disproportionately pointed at the GOP.
Good evening. My name is Congresswoman Michelle Bachmann from Minnesota's 6th District.
A lot of the people we're talking about have run for president: Marco Rubio, Bobby Jindal, and another who delivered the State of the Union response, although it wasn't the official opposition response, it was the Tea Party response. Michelle Bachmann.
The Tea Party is a dynamic force for good in our
Michelle Bachmann really wanted to keep herself in front of the public eye. The problem is she didn't get herself in front of the public camera.
As she delivers this response, she's gazing right up over into the side of the camera that is staring her in the face.
She's appealing for the vote of my taller friend.
Reduce the deficit and implement real job-creating policy.
Can you point to somebody who did this well, who could actually serve as a model for people hoping not to do a faceplant in their State of the Union response?
Kathy McMorris Rogers, a congresswoman from Spokane, Washington, who was at the time a rising star in the House Republican leadership. She gave the response in 2014 to President Obama.
Tonight, we honor America.
And she spoke to camera very calmly and reassuringly, spoke of her being a mother, talked about her life in Washington State.
Where a girl who worked at the McDonald's drive-thru can be with you from the United States Capitol.
It was reassuring, it was warm, it was personable.
She's sort of in a living room on a couch with a fireplace behind her.
This speech was a big boost for her.
Tomorrow night, Stacey Abrams, who ran for governor of Georgia, was unsuccessful, has never held federal office, and is delivering the response on behalf of the Democrats.
That's right. She's a black woman, and she is, at 45, a relatively young politician. She is really the spirit of the rising Democratic vote that we saw in November of 2018.
Okay, so advice for Stacey Abrams beyond drink water, look at the right camera.
Keep it brief, make it about the people who are watching it, and not so much about the back and forth between the parties over the shutdown or any specific issue. Make it as positive and as brief and to the point as possible.
That's NPR editor and correspondent Ron Elving. Thanks, Ron.
Thank you, Ari.
Now to the Golden Raspberry Awards, the Razzies as they're known, which honor Hollywood's worst. Some of Hollywood's biggest names have won: Ben Affleck, Al Pacino, Sandra Bullock. The awards are intended to poke fun at their less than Oscar-worthy performances. This year, they are also sparking controversy amid allegations that, shock, horror, gasp, the Razzies are rude. Chris Gardner's been all over the story for The Hollywood Reporter. He joins me now. Hey, Chris.
Hey, Mary Louise.
So I'm told this story landed on your desk thanks to an anonymous tip. What happened?
Yes, correct. So this anonymous source sent us a ballot on the day the nominations closed, alleging that some of the nominees who received enough votes to get nominated for a Razzie Award were replaced by some other higher profile actors, some other higher profile films.
So, give me an example of a film or an actor who seemed like they made the cut, but then ended up not being on the short list.
So the Shark Attack pick, The Meg, received enough votes to come in 11th place, but somehow it is included among the top 5 nominees this year. Kevin Spacey, A Billionaire Boys Club, got enough votes to be included among the top 5, but did not make the final cut, actually, and instead replaced by Bruce Willis and Johnny Depp.
So what's going on here? What did your reporting show?
My reporting showed that, straight from the founder's mouth, John Wilson, he tells me that there was a technical glitch that caused a surge in voting on the final day that the ballots were open, and that surge bumped up a lot of these actors and films to the top 5, and so that's why some of them were included, and the other ones, which seem to be a lock to get nominated this year, were left off. But, you know, my source is also alleging that some of them were probably replaced just because of star power, perhaps, or maybe, you know, somebody like Kevin Spacey was not included because he's a bit toxic right now, facing so many sexual misconduct allegations. So there's just a lot at play here. But John Wilson says that he's very satisfied with the final nominees and that the only problems that they had were these technical glitches.
And just to be clear in terms of how the process is supposed to work, anybody can sign up to vote on it. You pay us, what, $40, and that lets you vote for a year for your annual membership.
That is correct. So you can pay $40 for the year, or if you're feeling lucky, you can do $500 for a lifetime membership.
I mean, let me ask this, does it matter if there was a lack of complete integrity in a process that's supposed to be a little bit silly and lighthearted? This has not exactly been a Nobel Prize we're discussing.
Yeah, it's interesting because the whole thing is a bit tongue-in-cheek, but I think when people are spending their own money, people get upset when they think that there's something amiss there. You know, there are going to be no actors filing petitions to make sure that their name is included on there, but
they're not excluded from the Razzie competition.
Yeah, and so it will be interesting to see how this all shakes out. And, you know, this is a fascinating year in the award season in Hollywood on a larger scope as well, because, you know, there have been a number of controversies in the regular award season, and so to see it spill over to this is just to be expected in a year that's a bit wacky anyway.
That's Chris Gardner, senior staff writer with The Hollywood Reporter, talking to us about the Razzie Awards, which will be awarded on the 23rd of this month. Thanks so much, Chris.
Thank you so much, Mary Louise.
You're listening to All Things Considered from NPR News.
Support for NPR comes from this station and from the law firm Cooley LLP. With offices in the U.S., Europe, and China, Cooley advises entrepreneurs, investors, financial institutions, and established companies around the world, where innovation meets the law. From Constant Contact, whose marketing advisors work directly with small businesses for monthly marketing guidance, personalized support, and email campaign optimization. Learn more at ConstantContact.com. And from Boston Beer Company, brewing Samuel Adams Boston Lager, with hops that come from a small German farm that has been growing hops for over 200 years. Boston Beer Company, Boston, Mass., promoting responsible drinking.
And good afternoon to you. Happy Monday as well. Thank you for spending part of it with All Things Considered on member-supported KJZZ FM Phoenix and HD.
KJZZ is supported by Mesa Art Center, presenting Grammy Award-winning violinist Joshua Bell with pianist Sam Haywood, live at Mesa Art Center February 14th. Tickets at mesaartcenter.com.
A reminder, in Valley traffic, State Route 51 northbound at Thunderbird Road. There is a crash on the exit ramp. No delays in traffic, but just keep an eye out if you're headed that way. State Route 51 northbound at Thunderbird.
KJZZ is supported by Greater Phoenix Jewish Film Festival, presenting great films with a little Jewish flavor. February 10th through the 24th. 20 independent films at Harkins Theaters in Scottsdale, Tempe, and Peoria. Info at gpjff.org.
The next hour of All Things Considered is coming up. Right now, 64 degrees in the valley, under partly cloudy skies at 4 o'clock.
Pressure intensifies on Ralph Northam to resign as governor of Virginia.
We'll hear about the still growing controversy over a racist yearbook photo and a new allegation of sexual assault that has surfaced against the lieutenant governor.
It is Monday, February 4th, and this is All Things Considered. I'm Mary Louise Kelly.
And I'm Ari Shapiro. Ahead, a look at what to expect from tomorrow's State of the Union.
Also, new details about Blackwater founder Eric Prince and his business ventures in China.
The fact that someone like this could be going into business with Chinese companies closely tied to the Chinese Communist Party raises a lot of questions.
Plus, a ban on bump stocks takes effect in March,
giving people time to keep buying them for now and figure out what to do with the ones they have.
ATF was given 90 days here to either turn in your bump stock or smash it with a hammer and throw it away.
We'll have those stories after this summary of the day's news.
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Jack Spear. President Trump announced on Twitter today he'll nominate Acting Interior Secretary David Bernhardt to head the agency. NPR's Nathan Rott reports that Bernhardt has many detractors in the environmental world that will likely be confirmed.
The reactions to Trump's expected nomination of Bernhardt are falling along familiar lines. The oil and gas industry is applauding the move, pointing to Bernhardt's experience at Interior in previous administrations and his familiarity with the land agency's mission as reasons he should be confirmed. Environmental groups are pointing to Bernhardt's familiarity with industry as a lobbyist for oil, gas, and agriculture groups and his part in regulatory rollbacks as reasons he should not. Democrats will undoubtedly ask tough questions of the acting Interior Secretary during his confirmation hearings, but with Republicans still holding a slight majority in the Senate, a confirmation is expected. Nathan Rott, NPR News.
The Republican Speaker of the Virginia House says at the moment there's little appetite to impeach the state's embattled governor, Ralph Northam, though he says he should step down. Northam has become embroiled in a scandal over a racist photo, his 1984 medical school yearbook. It shows one person in blackface, another wearing a Ku Klux Klan hood. Northam now denies being in that picture despite apologizing for it Friday. As whether lawmakers might seek to remove Northam from office, the Speaker said lawmakers are hesitant to do that since they would effectively be overturning the election. Despite numerous calls he resigned, Northam so far has refused. He was reported to be meeting with staffers today. Voter registration groups in Texas are suing state officials in federal court, challenging the state's efforts to remove people suspected of not being citizens from the voter rolls. Ashley Lopez of member station KUT in Austin reports groups say the state is targeting foreign-born citizens.
The plaintiffs in this lawsuit include the NAACP, League of Women Voters, and a group mobilizing young Latino voters. Civil rights attorneys say the state's effort targets and threatens the voting rights of naturalized citizens and people of color. Tommy Buser-Clancy with the ACLU of Texas says he thinks the voter purge is politically motivated.
This voter purge is coming right on the heels of the 2018 midterm elections where you saw Latinx and then other minority voters voting in unseen before proportions in Texas.
The lawsuit was filed in a federal court in Galveston. So far, it is the third lawsuit in federal court challenging Texas's voter purge. For NPR News, I'm Ashley Lopez in Austin.
USA Today publisher Gannett says it has said no to an unsolicited $1.36 billion takeover offer from MNG Enterprises, a hedge fund-backed media group with a reputation for slashing jobs. However, the buyout battle may not be over. That says its board has unanimously rejected the offer as too low. However, the rival media group says it may nominate new Gannett board holders. You're listening to NPR.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include the Wallace Foundation, fostering improvements in learning and enrichment for disadvantaged children, and the Vitality of the Arts for everyone. Ideas at wallacefoundation.org. And the listeners who support this NPR station.
Good afternoon from KJZZ News in Phoenix. I'm Heather Van Blockland. The Commissioner of the Bureau of Reclamation, Brenda Berman, on Friday asked Arizona and other Colorado River states for input on potential water cutbacks the Interior Department could have to make. While Arizona technically made the federally imposed deadline for its own drought contingency plan, John Fleck, director of the University of New Mexico Water Resources Program, says final signatures in the state and California are still needed for federal approval.
What the Commissioner of Reclamation said on Friday was that if all those agreements happen, then she'll rescind the Federal Register notice and won't begin the process of preparing an alternative federal intervention.
Speaking on KJZZ's The Show, Fleck says he fully expects final signatures soon, preventing the federal government from taking over the drought contingency process. It was recently revealed State Representative David Stringer was arrested on multiple charges, including child pornography, when he was living in Maryland in the 1980s. Critics wanted to know if he disclosed that when he applied to practice law in Arizona. As KJCC's Claire Caulfield reports, the Supreme Court says they cannot find his application.
A spokesman for the Arizona Supreme Court said they only keep these kind of application records for 7 years, and Stringer was admitted to the state bar 15 years ago. Stringer says he has no criminal record, which is true. Although he was arrested and pled guilty to sex offenses, the plea deal said those would be erased if he successfully completed probation. However, the application to practice law in Arizona specifically requires disclosure of arrests and plea deals. Stringer still faces investigations by the House Ethics Committee, including one related to comments the lawmaker made last year about immigrants needing to blend in. Claire Caulfield, KJZZ News, Phoenix.
And more news online at kjzz.org.
KJZZ is supported by the UA Zeller College of Management, offering evening and online MBA options, and the top executive MBA program in Arizona, ranked by World University Rankings. Details at ellermba.arizona.edu.
This is All Things Considered from NPR News. I'm Mary Louise Kelly.
And I'm Ari Shapiro. The turmoil in the Virginia state capitol is stretching into a fourth day. To catch you up, on Friday, pictures surfaced from Governor Ralph Northam's medical school yearbook showing one man in a KKK robe and another in blackface. The governor, a Democrat, first apologized for the photos, then he reversed course and denied he was in them. All the while, he has refused to step down from office despite growing calls for him to do so from both sides of the aisle. NPR's Danielle Kurtzleben joins us now from Richmond. Hi, Danielle.
Hey, Ari.
Has the governor spoken publicly today?
No, he has not. What we do know is that he met with staff last night, and he met with his cabinet today. But we don't know what happened in those meetings. But despite all of these calls for him to resign, he really hasn't made any public motions that he is willing to do so. So we're just waiting to see.
Lots of other people have been talking today. Tell us what other lawmakers there in Richmond have been saying about the governor.
Right. So the Virginia Democrats have already called for him to resign. Now, today, outside of his office, the Republican Speaker of the House, Kurt Cox, spoke to reporters, and he was asked if he would go so far as to try to impeach Governor Northam. Now, he made it clear that he really hopes it doesn't come to that, and that the bar for that would be very, very high anyway. Here's Kurt.
And obviously with impeachment, that's a very high standard. So I think that's why we've called for the resignation. We hope that's what the governor does. I think that would obviously be less pain for everyone.
In addition to that, when he was asked, he said that Democrats haven't talked to him about impeachment anyway. So the focus right now is still very, very much on wanting Northam to resign.
What about other people in Richmond who are not lawmakers? How are folks reacting to this?
A lot of them are very angry. I mean, especially today, there were around 100, maybe more, protesters just outside the governor's mansion and state capitol. Once again, calling for him to resign, yelling for him to resign. A lot of these people are people who really supported Northam. They told me, you know, I canvassed for him, I phone begged for him, I really wanted him to win, so I feel really like my trust is betrayed. So you have a lot of very angry Democrats here. Now, aside from that, when you get past the protesters, I did speak to one woman in downtown Richmond today who said she also had supported Northam, but that you know, she's not sure how to feel about him right now. But she also told me that those people who do want him to resign, she said she sees that, she understands that. And if that is a widespread sentiment, that doesn't bode well for Northam, if even the people who are ambivalent are willing to err on the side of the people who want him to resign.
Now, if he did step down, the lieutenant governor would become governor, and that's a man named Justin Fairfax, who is facing controversy himself today. Fill us in with what's happening there.
Right, so Justin Fairfax, the lieutenant governor, very early this morning tweeted a denial of some sexual assault allegations that just came out. Now, those allegations are of an incident that allegedly took place in 2004, and they were published by a website called Big League Politics. Now, listeners may remember that that's the same conservative website that first published that photo of Northam's yearbook page from medical school. Now, we should add here that we haven't heard anything from the accuser herself, and we have not been able to verify her accusations. So there's a lot that's still left to shake out here, and this additional storyline is making an already tense situation even more tense.
That's NPR's Danielle Kurtzleben following the story from Richmond, Virginia, and we will have updates as it unfolds. Thank you so much, Danielle.
Thank you, Ari.
I want to bring in another voice here. Cornell William Brooks. He's a longtime Virginia resident. He's a professor at Harvard's Kennedy School. He is immediate past president of the NAACP, and he is here in our studios. Welcome.
It's great to be here.
I said you're a longtime Virginia resident. How long you lived there?
For over 20 years now.
Okay. And you voted for Ralph Northam for governor. What went through your mind as this story broke on Friday?
I was more disappointed than shocked, and I was profoundly shocked.
You're saying shocked, and I think that was the reaction of a lot of us as we watched this play out. Are you shocked
that someone would think it was okay to go to a party in blackface in the mid-'80s in Virginia?
Well, first of all, though that was many years ago, in the mid-'80s in Virginia, the fact of the matter is the term hate crime came into being in the 80s. The Klan was still vocal and viable in the 80s. In the 80s, there were hate crimes perpetuated against African Americans. And let us take note, in the 80s, we as a Commonwealth were yet wrestling with a legacy of massive resistance to the abolition of Jim Crow and the integration of the public schools. Appearing at a party in blackface is as bad now as it was then.
Give me a sense of how the conversation is playing out.